But the problem is a couple-fold. One is that Israel has transferred to India a number of advanced technologies, including American-designed AWAC aircraft, which make the Pakistani Air Force useless.
Yeah.
And Pakistan lives to have this nuclear standoff with India, a very unhealthy situation, I might add. Israel also transferred to India advanced anti-ballistic missiles, which changed the balance of power there, which really brings about a considerably more likelihood that there's going to be a nuclear war someday between Pakistan.
That's what I was going to ask
India.
you. Is that what we're leading to here? Is a proxy regional nuclear war, or perhaps a world war out of this?
Oh, we'll go to a world war if it starts there. There's no question about it at all. And we've got this one. When we talk about Christian Zionism, this idea of the apocalypse and the rapture and this crazy Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Tom DeLay, nutcase people, that are running in and out of Israel, talking about the Jews have got to be laughing at them, but how they want to bring about a great nuclear war so that they can float up to the side of Christ and watch everyone die in misery. Well, there are definitely policies out there to destabilize the world and bring about a nuclear war.
Well, I think it's interesting to watch because whenever, we call this an asset in the trade, someone who can be relied on to perform consistent with their personality profile in the right time, place, and circumstance. And whenever you need someone to make it appear that Israel is under threat, who comes to the microphone but Ahmadinejad? If you look into the back of the others around him, and go back into the Iranian, turnover in 79, you dig back into that and you realize this is not unlike, producing a movie. It's like you do a long-term casting call. You bring these characters onto the stage, and I think Ahmadinejad has absolutely played a marvelous role for Israel. He credibly, quote, credibly makes them look like they're under a threat at any given time. Mark, these are basically, master myth makers and very sophisticated storytellers. You create a storyline like the Clash of Civilizations, and you have to maintain the plausibility of that narrative. Mm-hmm. And part of what Gordon and I were doing in Pakistan, we're there at the invitation and sponsorship of the military, was to explain how Pakistan was being pre-staged, this was mid-February, as the next plausible evildoer. Now, since that time, of course, we've been, if you look on the Veterans Today website, you'll find lots of commentary on the, assorted attempts to maintain that storyline. And what we're doing is taking these operations, like the so-called Christmas Day bomber is now the crotch bomb sizzler. Remember this Nigerian who came through the airport at Schiphol in Amsterdam with the help of an Israeli-owned security company. Likewise, the Times Square bomber is now the Times Square Fizzler. Again, a sort of a remarkably inept operation by a guy who somehow went back and forth to Pakistan 16 times, shows up with some alarm clocks, some Walmart propane tanks, and fertilizer that won't explode, and about 80 M80s in the back of his car. And suddenly we're citing those two incidents as precedents for what a threat Iran proposes, and now who? Pakistan. So it's about creating a storyline, maintaining a narrative. That's why this crowd had to have such dominance in mainstream media, because when you have a system of governance dependent on facts, how do you get your facts? You go to media, you go to pop culture, you go to places to get facts. And at this point, our values are very much endangered. We will look back on this age as a dark age because we don't have the facts with which to operate. We've been induced by false beliefs, as in the false intelligence in which we believe to go into Iraq. We are going to war. We went to war based on beliefs. If that's not a crusade, I don't know what is. Mark, this is a very dangerous time for us as a democracy, because you do want to maintain civilian leadership, but when the leadership itself is corrupted and has corruption around it, what do you do? And you mentioned, I want to make sure your listeners know, because you mentioned a very loaded word earlier, psychopaths, and I did include a definition of that in guilt by association early on. And I just want to read the 5 descriptors of what psychopathy, and they are the following: superficial charm, pathological lying, egocentricity, lack of remorse, and callousness. Now, I needn't say more about the profile of the so-called state that we've seen in action over the past 6 decades. It absolutely matches it to a T. The challenge is if you're in a system of self-governance, democracy, the notion is very simple. All of us are smarter than any of us, so let us think together. Let us create a way to talk to each other and think together. And the crowd that we're profiling has dominated the tools that we need for thinking together, particularly mainstream media. So it's a delight to have operations like this or trying to bring facts to people and say, look, here's what's really going on. Pay attention because it's important to your freedom.
One of our editors is Gene Khrushchev, grandson of the former premier of Russia, and Nikita Khrushchev. And Gene was first secretary at the Soviet embassy, and then later in '06 became first secretary of the Russian embassy in Kabul. And that's what Gene tells me, basically, and I am in and out of Afghanistan periodically, that Richard Holbrooke is in Afghanistan basically to manage our narcotics business there, that the drug business that was zero when the United States moved in is now $65 billion a year, that we are moving heroin in and out of the United States on rendition flights. It goes in that drugs are moving around the world on chartered aircraft to the CIA and some of our military services. I interviewed some of the country managers for our military contracting firms, including the most notorious one. I will not mention that. And it is their suspicion that they have supervised narcotics loads out of Baluchistan. What we do know is, I know Israel's role. Now, there's news of bales of cash leaving the airport in Kandahar and going to Dubai and entering the banks there. It takes a lot of bales of cash to make $65 billion. Israel is the primary, not the only one, but the primary money launderer for the narcotics business that the United States is operating in Afghanistan. And their cut is between $2 to $5 billion a year. And with well over 400 members of Congress, and we'll say over 1,000 senior officers in the U.S. military have visited Israel for very suspicious vacations. The war in Afghanistan will live longer than any of us. No one could afford to have it end. And as far as who's involved, and everybody blames it on just the Karzai brothers, the big drug lords of Afghanistan. The CIA is running the narcotics business.
Same thing they did in Vietnam.
Over 12 countries it's spread over, and chiefs of state of several large regional countries, including India and others, are directly, personally involved. Now, the thing I can't say is 2 members of the United States Senate. One of them may have been a presidential candidate recently, and the other one may belong to an independent party, actually have flown from Delhi and Islamabad into Tel Aviv and into Zurich, physically carrying standby letters of credit for over $500 million at a time.
Okay.
Senior members of the U.S. government on their person.
Nice thing to do with diplomatic immunity.
Yeah. Great job for a war hero.
Yeah. Not surprised at all. Not surprised at all. We saw, there's nothing new with this. Britain fought a war with China over Britain's right to sell opium to the Chinese people. They were buying it, believe it or not, from the United States back then. The Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale was funded originally with opium money. We had Air America bringing Kunsa's opium, out and sending it to the United States. Hawaii was the transshipment point. We still have people in politics today whose rise to political power was tied in with the CIA smuggling of opium and heroin back to the United States during Vietnam.
I was in Southeast Asia in the late 1960s, which is, says a couple of things. One, that I'm old, and the other one, that I'm stupid.